Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Philip McMillan. Thank you for joining me. And today is again a presentation keeping you up to date with some of the news. This is from the UK, looking at the questions around excess deaths. Now, for those who don't quite understand, it seems that this is an inconvenient question. I'm not sure why, because if more people than normal are dying, you would think that we would want to know. Why wouldn't we want to know? What could be the logical reasons? And so, if you come across anybody who tells you excess deaths are not relevant, oftentimes what they mean is that they think or they're assuming that somebody is just focused on targeting the elephant in the room. That's not necessarily fair. I think that the elephant in the room certainly is relevant, but it's not just about that. If you are seeing excess deaths, why wouldn't you want to know? That really is very puzzling to me. And so, what we're going to focus on today is just a few simple points. The first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to look at a tweet that or an X post that was done today. I'm also going to show you some excess deaths and mortality in the UK from the Office of National Statistics. And I'm going to make reference to a paper about excess mortality post COVID-19 pandemic implications for secondary prevention. So, this is the focus that we have today. And I'm going to need you to listen to what was said in terms of the post. I'm going to play a short video around it. It's about 3.5 minutes long. And there is a word that is used, or two words, commercially sensitive with regards to the data. I want you to listen to that. And then I will share with you why I think this is such an important topic that needs to be addressed. So let's start with the point that was relevant today. So this is from a post today, and this is Us For Them UK. This is who had shared it. And they were talking about the fact that the UK medicines regulator and the health security agents failed to respond to a parliamentary demand for COVID vaccine safety and excess deaths data. So this was 2 weeks ago. They had the response from Dame Jenny Harris, who had said that very soon and in full. And so, despite them asking for that some weeks ago, the deadline for the 8th of March has already passed, and they were trying to follow up on it. And so, they were asking this person, Dame Jenny Harris, who is acting in relation to the UKHSA, to give a response to what was going on. And so, as I said, I want you to think carefully about what is being said and reflect on her words. Let's go to what she had to say.
You asked a question about the data around access deaths or excess deaths, and you're quite cautious about supporting the release of that data, but you said you look into it. Have you looked into it? Have you?
I'm reaching for my piece of paper, and I think the issue. I now understand that the question related to there was a letter which I think has gone to my own organisation. It actually went to Professor Riley, which was why I hadn't personally seen it at that point. So and to Secretary of State, and I know a formal response will come back to that. I think there were a couple of key points about that. One was about the data that had been shared, and there was a suggestion. I think the UKHSA had shared mortality data sets with pharmaceutical companies. As far as we can see, we're still obviously will do a formal results. We don't routinely share record level mortality data sets that include vaccination dates, doses, and or comorbidities with any of the pharmaceutical agencies, and that was I think the main point of the question. We have received a Freedom of Information request on that information, and we're trying to understand what we can and we can't release. And we have released anonymised aggregate data to manufacturers. This is for their own vaccines to support their obligation to report to MHRA as part of the routine safety surveillance. but these data are commercially sensitive. Now,
Just pausing you there. The data is commercially sensitive. Now, this is public health information, but it is commercially sensitive. Which business is this bad for? Let's continue to hear what she has to say.
Now, I think the other thing is the conversation started about excess all-cause mortality. Excess all-cause mortality is based on aggregated data, and it only signals. And I do just want to flag the sort of realities of this, because to report an excess, you have to have a baseline as well. And so for something like flu, where we would normally report an excess mortality rate for flu, we know that flu goes in seasonal patterns. We know what the baseline is, and then you can give an assessment. Now, for COVID, actually that hasn't established in the same way. So I think it's important that people understand that as well.
Just to pause here is that I'm not interested in COVID-19 excess deaths. We already know what that is. I'm just saying that we have excess deaths. So it's not about a baseline for COVID, it's a baseline for excess deaths.
Since COVID-19 vaccines were introduced, my organisation, UKHSA, has worked with MHRA, ONS and other academic groups on vaccine safety, and those are led by MHRA, hence I think my comment back to you, Chair, for the Science Committee. But I think an important point as well is there are very large data sets on things like open safety as well, where vaccine mortality has been looked at, and it's actually shown protective effects for when it's actually restricted to non-COVID mortality.
Now, this is a very, very important point, and just pause this here. And this is a data set that I have to go through as well. But what it was referring to is that when they looked at all non-COVID mortality and they looked at the boosted cohort, it seemed that the risk of death was lower in the vaccinated cohort for non-COVID deaths. Now, what I explain to people is that what they're missing here is that there is two other groups that are vaccinated that are much or significantly higher than the unvaccinated cohort, where excess deaths are up. This is a very important risk factor. I'll not say it yet. I plan to do the data analysis myself and try and come up with a clinical context. But let's get back to what she had to say.
So if you're looking at people who have not had COVID but have had a vaccine, actually there is no increased risk. So this is stepping right away from some of those risks. And if you just look generally, if you look at countries which have had higher vaccine uptake, they have lower excess all-cause mortality. That's quite generalist. But I think the key point here is we have looked. We don't routinely share. We will look. There is a commercial sensitivity element around this, and we will answer that question very soon in full.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer. I also appreciate the concerns there are over.
So this is the point with regards to that question about commercial sensitivity and what it is that we have to try and understand. It's a problem when this public information is inconvenient. The reality is that we still have to look at it. Now, I just want to remind everyone about a paper that came out just in January 2024. And I think that the implications of this paper was probably the reason that we had the change to the way how things are counted in terms of excess deaths. Because what it was showing is that when they looked at excess mortality in England post COVID-19 pandemic, they found some very important trends. One was that when they looked at 2022, it was 7.2% higher than the trend between 2015 to 2019. And then up to half the year in 2023, it was 8.6% higher. This was absolutely significant. And I think that maybe because this paper came out and made reference to a really important point, that we then had an important transition with regards to the reporting of excess mortality. Here is the excess mortality in England, March 2020 to December 2023. The link is in the description if you're interested. But here is the bit that I think is important. When they did that up to 2023, March 2023, you have to realize that they were looking at deaths 2015 to 2019, and they were using this as the baseline. For some reason, they think that that's not the correct thing to do. I'm not absolutely sure why they have decided that that's not the correct thing to do, because that makes perfect sense to me. So now they have changed the calculation, and based on that change to the calculation, it seems that excess deaths have fallen off. Well, let me just show you what I think is relevant. So, following from that link is the link to look at excess mortality prior to their change. So, here is what it looks like. So this is all causes excess mortality in England by age group, right? This is from 27th of March 2020 to the 29th of December 2023. So this is just about 3 to 4 months ago. This is looking at all persons. Where you see it above the line, that is higher than the 2015 to 2019 average. And you can see here, lots of deaths occurred just at the beginning of the pandemic. As what you expect is when more people die, you will find that in the summer period, less people died. And so it goes below the line. Then you go into the Delta wave, which took us into Christmas 2021. A lot of people were dying, not as much in the first wave. And at this point here, you started to have the vaccination program. This would start to run out. Then you have coming into the summer period again, less deaths. This was at the point where people started to think the pandemic was over. No, no, no. We then went into the winter of 2021 into 2022, and then you again it goes up, then it comes down, goes below the baseline. This is what you expect when more people die. But look beyond this. Suddenly now, all across all ages, only going below the baseline a few times since early 2022. This is the problem. This is why there is a concern about this elephant in the room, because we don't have a clear reason. It's not necessarily because of COVID, because when you look at the COVID deaths, it's not COVID deaths that are causing it. Let's break that image down a little bit more. So this time, as I said, these are the COVID deaths where you have yellow. Let me just show you. This is the same thing, weekly registered deaths. Wherever you have yellow, these are the COVID deaths. And you can see them peaking and then it tails right off. So let's go back to this a bit and let's examine by age group. This is now ages 0 to 24. And you can see during the lockdown periods, they had lots of less deaths. I guess they weren't car accidents or falling off buildings and so on. But as time goes by, you see this starting to rise. And now you see a trend 0 to 24, which is elevated beyond the normal. Now, this is concerning because we don't fully understand what is the mechanism of this. And it is not really COVID deaths in this age group. Again, if you look at 25 to 49, again, you can see some died in the early part of the pandemic, some died with the Delta wave. But then beyond that, that has remained up. Now, as I said, I don't know how anyone can discount the elephant in the room. You may not know what it is, but for goodness sake, you can't take it off the table. The only people who seem to have, well, I guess some degree of balance were the over 85s. So there they went up again, excess deaths in the middle of July 2022, and it remained about flat, slightly trending towards slightly excess deaths. But this is the reality of what we're facing. Now, a lot of people think that this is just about commercial sensitivity. and whether or not, if there's a problem, you can take on a big pharma to get compensation. I have no idea. I can't actually get into that's a legal question. My question is very simple from a clinical point of view. Why are these people dying? Is there anything we can do to mitigate it? Should we be looking for mitigation strategies? Is there any way to identify whether or not somebody is at higher risk? What would be the reason for not getting those questions answered? That's the bit I don't understand. I can't understand anybody who isn't interested in trying to figure that out. And so I've come to the conclusion that whenever you see anybody not interested in this, I'm convinced they have a commercial interest. There is a conflict of interest somewhere, and for whatever reason, they can no longer be objective. You would think everybody would be happy about getting rid of the question with the elephant in the room, and you do that by doing appropriate research. That's what I think needs to be done. They need to get the answers. It's not going to go away. And sadly, excess deaths doesn't seem to be going away either. We need answers. We need to find ways to mitigate, to protect the population. That's the role of government. That's the role of the statisticians. Should not be acting in the interests of big business. They need to act in the interest of the public. Have a great evening. Look forward to speaking to you again.